Today, I'm personally speaking. Our guest is Father Steve Jakubowski, who recently appeared as a guest, as a contestant on Jeopardy. Stay with us. Hello and welcome to Personally Speaking. I'm your host, Msgr Jim Lisante, and Father Steve Jakubowski joins me now. A Holy Cross Father, Father Steve Jakubowski is a parochial vicar at St. Ignatius Martyr Parish in Austin, Texas, and he was a recent contestant on Jeopardy, the long-running quiz show, in an episode that aired September 19th. Father Steve, a Grand Rapids, Michigan native, is a graduate of the University of Notre Dame and was ordained in April of this year, 2024. He's here with us today to talk about his vocation to the priesthood, his experience on Jeopardy, and how he hopes his television appearance helps give a positive impression of the church and clergy in general. So joining me now, I'm so pleased to welcome to Personally Speaking, Father Steve Jakubowski. We're delighted to welcome to Personally Speaking, Father Steve Jakubowski. And am I getting that name right? Am I saying it right?
You are. Yeah. Thank you.
Good.
Thanks for having me.
And is that Polish or Czech background? What's the
Polish. My mom's side is Slovak, actually, so you're doubly correct.
Okay,
almost.
good. I got a little good blend there.
That's right. But Polish is
my closest friend was a guy named Father Joe Lukaszewski. Everyone called him, but he said if you want to get it right, do the Polish way, Łukaszewski. So
Łukaszewski, that's
I
right.
had some practice there. First question. We talked in the introduction about your recent appearance on Jeopardy, and we'll talk about that. But more importantly, when a young man, a relatively young man, normal guy, makes the incredible leap of faith to say, I want to devote my life to priesthood, I'm always intrigued by family of origin. So, Father Steve, let's start there. Like the family that raised you, nominally Catholic, actively Catholic, what's the family and the kind of family you come from?
Yeah, I was tremendously fortunate to have a really very active Catholic family. Both my parents are, practice their faith, and kind of I feel like my whole life sort of orbited around the church, just between kind of the school or just growing up around it. So I really I was quite fortunate to kind of have that background basically from day one of kind of just growing up around in the church, and then kind of receiving that gift of faith almost by osmosis as I was growing up.
So in your family, it's a real and a practiced faith that you were formed by. Now, many, many families in a parish like mine, we have about 3,000 families here on Long Island. Many of them would be happy, that somebody's son became a priest. But the truth is, in most families, they'd really rather it be somebody else's son. So tell me about your family's reaction to this idea that you had developed, that you actually were being called to serve the church in a particular way as an ordained priest. How did they react to that?
Yeah. So I began kind of discerning seriously the priesthood while I was in college. I practiced my faith, and I was involved certainly as I was growing up. But it wasn't really, at least priesthood wasn't really something explicitly on my mind until college, really. And at that point, I think they were actually really supportive. It was, supportive in sort of the like a hands-off way, right? I'm grateful to them, because it wasn't this kind of there's neither kind of pressure to keep going or to kind of, okay, this, you must do this or something like that. But on the other hand, there wasn't that kind of there wasn't the pushback either. So I was really quite fortunate actually to have kind of a lot of encouragement, a lot of support, but also kind of that freedom too, that space to to kind of just discern what it was that God was calling me to, and then have the freedom to follow that.
Father Steve is our guest. We talked about the fact that he appeared recently on Jeopardy, but we'll talk more about his journey. A year ago, my mom passed away, and when she did, I found a letter that she had written me when I went on an Ignatian retreat shortly before ordination, where she said, I know this retreat is important in discerning whether or not priesthood is for you. If you become a priest, we think it's a noble and wonderful calling. But if you don't decide to become a priest, we just love you anyway. And that freedom you're talking about, to support you and encourage you, but at the same time not to pressure you, is a beautiful thing that your parents Yeah, tell me about them. Like when you look back at your parents and the way they raised you, Steve, what did they do right?
I think, yeah, I'm grateful for them. And I think I learned and kind of, was given different gifts kind of from each of them. My mom is kind of one of those just dynamos at the parish. I mean, she's really quite involved in, it seems, every group, every kind of committee. Just one of those kind of, really involved people. And I think, there's certainly an example there of kind of, okay, what does it actually mean to, um, yeah, to kind of give of yourself in service to the church, and kind of what does that take also too, just as far as how to actually kind of take responsibility as well for kind of the well-being of the community, and kind of that ownership of the parish that kind of, yeah, really requires like a great deal of buy-in kind of at every level. So she gave me a really wonderful example of kind of yeah, a really practical faith, a faith that kind of did
Mhm.
work for the church, or that sort of
Right.
showed up in the calendar, showed up in kind of the way that she organized her life.
How about
Like,
Dad?
and on my dad's side, I think it's he's kind of just a really interesting and interested person who finds I think just a lot of wonder in the world. I mean, he just loves learning. He's if there's something interesting or something that um, can kind of capture his interest, then like he's focused. And I think through that, there's kind of a great witness of like how it is that kind of the riches of our faith are something that we can not only like learn intellectually, not only kind of know the right answers on a test or something, but it's these mysteries before which like the proper response is sort of awe, right? To have that yeah, real appreciation of like, oh my gosh, this is like
Hmm.
the greatest gift imaginable.
Right.
And I kind of learned that, yeah, from him truly. Yeah, so there's sort of like those characteristics that I think
They sound like great
they,
folks, and you are blessed to have them. Father Steve Jakubowski, as we mentioned, was a guest on Jeopardy. But for those that don't know, especially our listeners and viewers, people enter different dimensions of the priesthood. I'm a diocesan priest, so my life is spent in the Diocese of Rockville Center on Long Island, New York. But Father Steve chose to embrace the community of the Holy Cross congregation, and I'm just wondering, every congregation has a particular charism. What's the charism of the Holy Cross Fathers, and what was it about that charism that attracted you to say that's how I want to serve?
yeah. So I'd say, in the Congregation of Holy Cross, we're, wherever we go as educators in the faith. That's from our constitutions. And so certainly, our different apostolates, we have got a number of universities, a number of schools and parishes, but it's kind of always that just education in the faith, right? And then I think we do that kind of characteristically through community, right? It's sort of those two things together, that education and family, that is really kind of, that's the mark of our community. For myself, it was, I went to Notre Dame for school, and, the Congregation of Holy Cross founded Notre Dame. So that's where I encountered the community for the first time. And it was just a mix, I think, of the apostolate that some folks were able to do. Just I met a lot of priests who were missionaries, kind of doing exciting things. Some were academics, and all of just inspiring in a lot of different ways. But there was also this kind of grounding in their common life, right? I mean, there was this way in which it was clear that yeah, praying together, eating together, kind of being united in a community was really at the basis of kind of what made the apostolate, the ministry, possible.
Mhm.
And that was just really appealing to me, kind of that model.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's ultimately kind of what I think drew me to yeah, religious life and religious priesthood specifically, just kind of that mixture of community, and then um, and how that kind of informs and shapes the ministry that we're able to
Sure,
do.
sure. Father Steve Jakubowski is a associate pastor at St. Ignatius Martyr Parish, which is located in Austin, Texas. I mention that because, like all of us, of course, either on a daily or weekend basis, you're going to be preaching the word, you're getting into the pulpit, giving, I hope, homilies that draw people in. I mention that though, Steve, because um, in the whole year of giving homilies, you will not touch directly as many people as you did by going on Jeopardy, where several million people saw you at once. Has that experience convinced you that, yes, it's wonderful to be a parish priest, it's wonderful to be an educator and teach young people in college, but you were able to be exposed to, and they were exposed to you on Jeopardy, millions of people that would take you years to reach in our normal ministry. Does any of this leave you wanting to do more in popular media?
To be perfectly honest, it's almost the opposite. I'm quite happy to, kind of be back to normal here.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, certainly, yeah, there's kind of numerically and quantitatively, like, yeah, a big difference between kind of the number that fit in our church on a Sunday and then I guess the viewership of, a show like that. But, I think it's pretty clear too, just, okay, what is my assignment? What's my role? What was I ordained to do? And that's, yeah, like you say, preach the gospel.
Yeah.
And, the invitation to be on the show came to me in April. It was about 3 weeks after I was ordained, actually. So it was,
Wow.
just kind of one of those out of nowhere kind of pretty an exciting month of my life, just having, just been ordained. So it was kind of one of those just out of nowhere opportunities that, I wasn't really looking for, and was kind of just this fun, interesting, okay, like maybe we'll go and do that. But at the end of the day, it's like kind of what I'm here to do, I feel like, is celebrate the sacraments, preach the gospel. The game show is, it's a little bit different and a little bit out there, but,
Yeah.
so it was kind of a fun, totally different thing. And, but ultimately I'm pretty happy to be kind of settling
Yes,
back.
right where you are. Father Steve Jakubowski was also awarded by being on Jeopardy a certain amount of cash, and I mention that because by being a member of a religious community, he takes an additional vow that we in secular priesthood do not, which is the vow of poverty. And let me ask you, Steve, with that whole vow, was that a tough one for you, or was that pretty easy to say? I give it over to God. I give it over to my congregation. I don't need to focus too much on what am I going to make or not make in life in terms of finances.
Yeah, for me, it's I guess it's been relatively easy, and maybe that's just because when I entered formation, I had really no assets to speak of. I was, a college student. There's not like I didn't have much to give up. But kind of what that vow looks like for us is really it's that common purse, and it's that kind of recognition. Okay, what we kind of pool our resources together, and then the community supports us. So it's
Mhm.
ideally that'd be kind of like the model from the Acts of the Apostles, and the degree to which that resembles kind of most people's definition of poverty is, I think,
Yeah.
it can be larger or smaller, but ultimately, I mean, my experience of that vow has kind of just been like, okay, learning to just trust the community, trust kind of my brothers in Holy Cross that, all right, we'll take care of each other and we'll be taken care of. And that's kind of, yeah, ultimately like a really consoling foundation that, I think everybody sort of in different ways, is looking for that. But yeah, just kind of through our fraternity, through our brotherhood, and through that vow, it's kind of in a really concrete way. Yeah, just that,
For those
support.
who are just learning about Father Steve, when he went on Jeopardy through social media, they kind of lit up with this very popular response, primarily from women, talking about how he was this very attractive priest on this program, Jeopardy. Now, with all that good stuff that was coming in and calling you all sorts of wonderful names, Father Steve, how do you maintain a sense of humility when people are blowing smoke up your proverbial dress?
It's all that's ultimately not really helpful, right? I mean, it's just the internet is volatile and kind of a strange place, and fortunately, it has a short attention span, so it's just sort of those 15 minutes, and then
Right, right.
everybody kind of moves on, and that's fine. Um, yeah, I think just yeah, honestly, it's that part's been just kind of uncomfortable, I guess, but it's just trying to just kind of move through it and yeah, and recognize that
Yeah.
some things are just out of my control in that. So,
And do your brothers in community give you a hard time about all that stuff?
it's yeah. I mean, I've been yeah, I've been hearing about it, but it's just what it is. So
Yeah. I want to talk a little
definitely
bit.
a surprise. I did
I
not
want
see
to
that
move to
coming.
a kind of social issue that's somewhat close to you. Coming from Grand Rapids, Michigan, I don't know if it would be as big as it would be now, but when you're in Austin, Texas, and Texas is very much on the cutting line of one of the more uh, challenging issues facing our country, which is what should be our disposition toward welcoming the migrant, welcoming the stranger. Um, how do you handle that? I mean, does it come up in preaching? Is it something that you have to, when you're in a parish in Texas, address like all of America is talking about who's coming over our border? How do we handle this? What should be our disposition? Of course, Pope Francis has been pretty clear about wanting us to welcome the stranger as Christ instructed. But you're on the front lines there, and you're a preacher, and you have a sitting in front of you a congregation that's trying to make sense of one of the great moral challenges of our time. How do you approach it, Steve?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, certainly kind of one of the obvious things that kind of came to mind, when I first moved to Texas is just, coming from, I'd spent most of the last 10 years in Indiana in formation and yeah, certainly kind of just the distinct culture and the, yeah, like certainly far more pronounced kind of like Hispanic culture and how that infuses kind of both the church and then just society at large. Yeah, I mean, it's really a great gift and is a huge part of what we're about and what we do is ministering there. I don't know that I'm qualified to really opine on kind of best practices on kind of a topic as big and complicated as migration, but I mean, I think it's kind of just maybe even the main thing, right? Like our church kind of gives us the roadblock or the roadmap as far as okay, like what is the gospel ask us to do, right? To yeah, as you mentioned that there are those repeated calls in scripture to yeah, to welcome the migrant among you, and so yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't want to oversimplify a really complicated issue, but I think it's just okay. How do we kind of do what we can do, and you know, in the with
Mm-hmm.
what's right in front of us, kind of who are the people in front of us, who are the people in our church, how do we love them, welcome them, serve them, and yeah, I mean, I realize that question is far broader than kind of the scope of what kind of one parish in Austin's able to do, but it's kind of just yeah, loving the people in front of you. I think is
Yeah.
kind of would be the thrust of my
Helping
response.
people to understand. We've been talking about it certainly in New York a lot, trying to be faithful to the command of Christ to welcome the stranger, but also hoping that we can organize the chaos as it presently stands to make a pathway that will make sense to people. Listen, go back to that ego question for a second, because anyone dealing with watching, we're on Sirius XM on the Catholic channel, but there's also a great presence on YouTube of people who get to see this show. So looking at you, they're going to say, okay, young, normal, good looking guy, how does he put in perspective the whole challenge of celibacy? So my question for Father Steve is it something that, I want to be a priest, so this is just something that comes with the package and I've got to accept it whether I like it or not? Or is it something that you somehow or another welcome and see as an opportunity to serve more fully? You cannot get ordained in this church without being mindful of the demands of celibacy and the opportunities of celibacy. Over the years of formation, how did you, Father Steve, figure out what it means for you?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It is a just a big question and sort of an obvious question when anyone is thinking about or kind of moving toward ordination. Um, and I guess there's a number of answers. I mean, right, there's sort of one you hear about sometimes is sort of the practical, right? I mean, how do you kind of be available and at the service of lots of people if you're also kind of, it's sort of, I guess, a practical question of how can you, yeah, be available to serve as kind of a spiritual father if you're, also a father of families. Although, I think ultimately, I don't think that's the deepest response to that question, and we can see in um, that question is a little bit, I think, for myself and for kind of how I would, I guess, approach it and how I kind of came to reconcile and embrace kind of, yeah, that vow of chastity, which I make as a religious anyways, and then that promise of celibacy, which comes with being a priest. I think it's, yeah, ultimately kind of comes from that statement of Jesus, right? Of learning to come to single-hearted intimacy with Him, right? Is there a way in which celibacy, in that kind of committed way, opens our path or represents a response to an invitation from Christ to kind of be committed to Him in a singular and unique and intimate way? And I think the answer is yes.
Father Steve, as I mentioned, was a guest, a contestant on Jeopardy, and the question that was a major trip up for him was the movie "Do the Right Thing." Had you seen it before?
I had not. I had not. I needed the prompt for the question. The clue had to do with a
Movies,
pizzeria being burned, which is a major scene in the movie, I understand.
right?
So I was just trying to pull, all right, I need a movie set in New York that might involve a pizzeria that I'd never seen before, but Do the Right Thing, I did not have it. So,
Yeah, it was fine. I thought to myself, I know the answer because I'm a Spike Lee fan, but
mhm.
didn't know that film, you wouldn't know what they're talking about. Or Frank Sinatra. So my heart was with you on that, saying, "Oh man, this is a tough one if you don't know that
Yeah.
movie." I thought Godfather makes perfect sense. Nice Italian thing, pizza, the whole thing.
It had some components, but it was, and the woman next to me who ended up the Jeopardy champion for the day, she's from Brooklyn. So
Oh,
I knew going into it, oh, the chances I know a New York movie, she doesn't, and she was ahead of me, so I'd have to get it right, and she would have to get it wrong in order to pass her. And so the chances were slim going in, but even before the question was asked. But that's the way it
that's
goes.
okay. Father Steve had admitted that had it been a question on scripture or geography, or he majored in math, he would have been fine. But it had to be a question about movies. Now, I'm not going to keep you too much longer, Father Steve, but I wanted to ask you. I'm in the 44th year of serving as a priest, and the church that I came into in 1981, I had never anticipated some of the challenges that would be happening over the next 40 years in terms of the church and the challenges. At the beginning of this experience, you're what we would call certainly newly ordained. What's your vision for the church? What's your hope for the church? I know it's in some ways, taking a leap into the dark because who knows where it will go. But you must have some sense when you start out of where you'd like the church to go.
Yeah, so I've been at this parish I'm at currently in Austin for, call it 15 months now. There was a deacon before I was ordained, so I've been there a year and a little bit more, and it's been really a wonderful experience because I think, in it's certainly like a fear on some level of just, you can kind of doomsday or worst case scenario of like, okay, what could become of the church if, just given kind of cultural conditions or just different ways in which society moves. It's easy to kind of to imagine sort of, yeah, just kind of a pretty pessimistic outlook. But, my experience so far in my, the parish here and just, the actual kind of, what I've seen and who I've met, like, there's just a lot of wonderful people in our church. There's a lot of wonderful families. There's a lot of wonderful things happening. There are, people coming to see and know God more fully. And I think at the end of the day, right, it's, there are, yeah, big challenges and we got to, not close our eyes to that. But,
Mhm.
um, like, what does it really mean for us to trust in the Holy Spirit, right? To have faith in God's ownership of this and God's,
And it's
care
also
for us, right? And God's sort of the one in charge. And maybe it looks like the metrics we like it to look like or not, but I think just at the end of the day, like, how do we, yeah, have that kind of genuine faith that, the Holy Spirit's not going to leave us alone and there's not going to be, anything that God leads us to that He's not going to give us the grace to, to not only make it through, but like to flourish, right? It's
right,
sort of,
right. Not just to survive, but to prosper.
yeah.
Steve Jakubowski is our guest. Steve, I promise I'm wrapping it, but this may be a loaded question, but I'll ask it anyway. I look back to being a newly ordained. I know a lot of the success of that first assignment was because I had a pastor, a guy named T. Peter Ryan. He's still in his high 80s, he's still alive, who just allowed this newly ordained to try new things, to trip, to stumble, to fall, to make mistakes. But he gave me a lot of room to experience ministry, and I'm always grateful for that. Tell us about your own boss. What's he like?
Yeah, he's great. I wouldn't tell him that to his face, but no, it's not. I think for the same reasons too. It's just sort of somebody who, yeah, the pastor at our parish, Father John, is I think just good at kind of letting people do what they're good at. Kind of putting people in positions to succeed, to sort of minister well, to use their gifts, and then also good at kind of, that sort of decisiveness in the way that sort of just, okay, like gives us a direction, sort of gives us an identity, and then, all right, let's get the work done.
Good.
Just kind of pointing out, okay, this is who we are as a parish. This is what we're about. This is how we're trying to welcome people, how we're trying to show people Jesus Christ. And then and within that, there's just so much freedom. Like, okay, if we're on the same page, if we're rowing the boat together, then, that really gives a lot of energy. And then that kind of builds on itself, right? Because then good things start to happen because we're kind of all, trying to just like do what the Spirit gives us the grace to do. And then, good things happen when that happens.
I want to thank Father Steve Jakubowski for being with us. I want to thank his parents for raising this good man. I want to thank the people of Grand Rapids, Michigan for helping to form him. I certainly want to thank the people at University of Notre Dame and the Holy Cross community for being there to support, nurture, challenge him, and have his back. I want to thank the people down in Austin for raising up this newly ordained and giving him the support that he has. And I want to thank the people of Jeopardy for saying, let's take a chance and have a Catholic priest on our program, and the great job you did, and the way in which you positively presented a young man who's embraced his priesthood, a man who loves the church and loves his God. Father Steve, we hope and pray here, personally speaking, you have a long and wonderful priesthood, that your time and community is a time of great blessings. And just thank you for coming on our program. Thank you for being who you are. Most importantly, thank you for making the choice to say yes to the Lord's call. You're an inspiration to a lot of us, and thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a great grace for me.
Thanks for being with us on Personally Speaking. If you need to reach me for any reason, you can do that at personallyspeakingpodcast@gmail.com. You probably listened to this program on the Catholic channel, 129, and you can do more than that. You can watch it as well on YouTube if you like by searching under Personally Speaking with Msgr Jim Lisante. We're also on Facebook at Personally Speaking with Msgr Jim Lisante. We're on Instagram at Personally Speaking Podcast. I'm delighted to serve as host and executive producer, Personally Speaking. Our producer is Lisa Jandovitz. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be with you again next time on Personally Speaking.